Chris Ross, thanks very much. It's for meeting with us today. It's November 22nd, 2015.
Is it?
It is. A fine, bright, early winter day
Yes.
here. Why don't we just start, tell us about how you got started with pipe bands.
A family. I'm from Sutherland, Bonar Bridge. My father's family were pipers. My father was the youngest of 6, so I think by default and just being different, he decided to play drums. But my uncle was a piper. I'll come back to that one later because it's a good story about First World War and pipes and whatnot. So one of my first memories really is about the age of 2 or 3 is standing with my mum watching the Argyll Bonar Pipe Band playing in the village square and marching off to We're No Awa to Baidawa and Happy We've Been All Together. These great old tunes that you never really hear very much anymore. So yeah, one of my first memories. And my father was the leading tip, my brother played side, and eventually my older sister played side, which was a bit innovative in those days, early 60s. There was a girl playing, to the extent that they didn't know what to dress her in, and would she wear spats and all this nonsense. I was busy Highland dancing actually, that was my thing. Did quite a lot of competitive Highland dancing, but not much. I think I went to Pitlochry once. That was about as far south as we went. We tended to focus in the Highlands north and round about Inverness. But the pipe band would be playing, I'd be dancing, so the whole family really was involved in the music, saturated in the music really. And
did your father push you towards the drumming side immediately? Was it snare drumming or bass drumming right away? He taught the kids snare and tenor, and he played bass, and in fact we all had to go at everything, including the mace. Right.
So, but he didn't so much teach us as, the girls within the family, he didn't officially teach us, we just sort of rattled things out with knives and forks on the kitchen table, because he did that, he would come in, so we would all do that on the kitchen table, and until I was in my 6th year at secondary school, my last year at secondary school, I had most of the qualifications I required. I was just too young to go to university, so I had a year of what they call an out year now, but I just stayed at school and did other things, and one was I thought I'll go along with Dad to where he was teaching drumming in Lairg, and he taught the guys and I kind of picked it up off him, off the guy who was teaching, so I ended up playing tenor basically. But I had learnt enough side drumming to rattle out a basic 2/4 and 6/8 and stuff like that.
So at that time, would tenor drumming be swing tenor, flourishing, and or was it more rhythmical?
It was both. It was the basic rhythm, with flourishes, but in a more simplified fashion than things are now.
Right.
As was the side drumming, it was much more the basic army style 6/8 and 3/4, because the band was set up from all the men that came back from the war. That's what set up so many of the local bands. So yeah, I played in the Bonar band that year before I went to uni. When I went to university, I was too busy trying to do dentistry. But with my dancing connection, I used to compete against Jean Swanson and some of these heroes of that era. So Jean dragged me along to her dancing classes, and so I got back into dancing. So I did a few things like dancing for the Queen at her Silver Jubilee at Holyrood Palace and some fun things like that. And I think I was in my 3rd year at Edinburgh. Edinburgh was not a hive of piping. You hardly ever heard pipes anywhere, unless it was dancing sort of thing. But there was a torchlight procession down the high street of the students, and I heard pipes, and I thought, oh right, so gravitated and found 4 guys in baseball caps and jeans playing pipes down the street. So anyway, got chatting away to them, and they were part of the OTC, which is the Officers Training Corps attached to the universities. So they said, oh, come along, Chris. So I went along, and they had an adjutant with a very good sense of humour, because I said, I don't want to join the army, I just want to play in the band. He said, yeah, Chris, come on, sign all these forms. And before I knew it, I was in there.
And this would have been when? What sort of year?
1975.
Okay.
75, 76. So I joined as a tenor drummer, and with a ex-Scots Guards pipe major, Alistair Moyes, who was great pipe major. And as with OTCs, sometimes there's not very many players, and other years you get lots of players come in. So I joined, and there seemed to be quite a lot of good guys appeared, and we actually had quite a good band at that point. Apart from when we went on our first weekend exercise away, I wasn't the tenor drummer, I was the leading tip. I was the only tip. I was the drum corps. And it kind of grew from there. But we that was a great experience that I hadn't really. It was a total change from doing dental surgery at university. OTC was a total contrast.
Bit of an outlet.
Yes, aye. You were out and about in the fresh air and doing all sorts of things. But I met an awful lot of people that have become lifelong friends really through the OTC. Because although we were in the Edinburgh and Heriot unit, there was one in Glasgow, one in Aberdeen, and one in Tayforth, which is St Andrews, and Dundee universities. And once a year we used to have a pipe band course in St Andrews. So we all got together there. So
right.
Dougie Pincock and loads of folk, you know.
Very
we're
good.
all there.
And at what point did the bass drum really come into it in a big way? Because it sounds like you were focusing on snare and tenor at that point. When did you make that transition sort of in a significant way to the bass drum?
Again, kind of accidentally. Again, that was with the OTC. I was playing, there was another band, they had no bass drummer, and I think, what band was it? Can't remember. I was maybe playing with Tayforth, but another band was short of a bass drummer, and it's a bit ironic now thinking about it, but this guy called Neil West, who's the bass drummer with Strathclyde, the Glasgow Police, now Strathclyde Police. He came up and said, somebody says you'd play bass drum for us. And I said, yeah, if you like. So I just went on and played, and it just felt quite natural. I played bass at home, on and off. As I say, we all had a shot at everything. And he said, oh, that was all right. There's this wee band called the Vale of Atholl looking for some drummers. You fancy coming up? And so, yeah, I went along to a Vale of Atholl practice.
And that would be about 1980?
That would be about 81, I think.
Right.
Yes, about 81. Yeah, I was in the OTC for quite a while, even when I finished university. Yeah.
And the Vale at that time would have been still grade 2?
That's grade 2,
oh, yeah.
Yes.
And rising really quickly.
Yeah, they had a fantastically strong pipe corps, and they were short of players at the back end.
Right, and who was the leading drummer at that time in the Vale? Would have been, was it John?
No, that was the problem. They were short of a drummer with the experience really to take over. I think at that level they had players, but nobody to be in control. I joined the same week as Dougie Stronach, and 1 week later John Moneagle appeared, and he was our first, my first leading drummer, apart from my father, sort of thing.
Right.
So.
And from that time on, you were focused on bass drumming pretty much.
Well, actually, no. At that point, I played tenor, because John brought his father-in-law Dougie to come up, and he played bass, because I think John had obviously played with Dougie before, and taking on a new corps, it probably gave him a structure to see where it was going. I have to say, John Moneagle's a great teacher. He took us to that whole corps. It taught us so much, really. I never really started playing bass so much until Haggis was headhunted for a bass drum after Dougie had retired, sort of thing. And Haggis being sort of from the West Coast, and me being from the Highlands, and fairly quiet at that point. And it took a few wee drams, Haggis and I, to chat away, and eventually Haggis said, I'm fed up playing bass just because I'm a big bloke. They all think I should play bass. I would really rather play tenor. And I went, well, actually, I'd rather play bass. Oh, right. So we sort of decided we would just swap places the next practice and see what happened. And the rest, kind of, as I say, is history. He was much happier on tenor. He was a frustrated tenor drummer, and they kept putting him on bass because he was a big bloke.
Yeah, and he made a great career out of the tenor, and you on bass.
I mean, a fantastic bass drummer too, but that was him doing what he enjoyed doing, and I was much happier on bass.
So the Vale at that point, about 82, 83, made the transition to grade 1. Right.